episode 22.
Welcome to the Live Fit podcast with your host, Glenn Johnson. Today you will learn techniques for permanent weight loss and improved overall health.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit podcast. This is episode 22, and I am Glenn Johnson. Today I am absolutely delighted to have Mrs. Erin Brown from Fit Mama Training. She is a really remarkable woman. She has such an amazing philosophy and just image of herself and being and her potential that it really knocked my socks off. There is so much poor body image with women out there today, so much self-hatred and nitpicking and striving for this perfection that's never obtainable, this image that they see in magazines and TV and models, that it's really very, very harmful to a person's psyche, and this image that they think they need to achieve in order to be good enough or pretty enough or just right or happy enough. And Erin Brown has a really sensible attitude and a way of bringing yourself back down to reality, to accept yourself and be comfortable with the way you are. Several years ago, she lost 100 pounds, and the way she did it essentially is she changed her mind. She's going to talk to us for a while, and she is going to spill her guts and tell us all of her secrets. She's really quite the amazing person. Live Fit Online will help you get fit for the summer and stay that way for the rest of your life. This is not a diet. It is an efficient system of eating and moving that will help you become healthy, fit, and free. LiveFitOnline.net. Now it's time for the answer to last week's question of the week. When strength training, women, A, should avoid heavy weights so they do not bulk up. B, they will typically not build big muscles because they lack the hormones needed. C, they should keep the weights light. Or D, they should avoid it and only do cardio exercise. Well, the latter is what I hear so often and see so often from women, and it's what I argue against the most, because women definitely need to lift weights, and they need to lift the heavy ones too, not the pixie little 5-pounders. They really need to lift heavy weights, and the reason is because that's what builds strong bones, strong muscles, increases their metabolism, increases their strength, their empowerment, their self-worth, their self-value. And you know, the argument against it is from women. They tell me they don't want to look like a man. They don't want to bulk up and get big muscles. And I say, look, if it was that easy, all these guys would have a lot of big muscles. And yes, many do, but there's many that don't. The thing is, women, you're not going to get great big giant muscles. You're going to have to work really, really hard to get big muscles. In fact, you're going to have to work 2 to 3 times harder than the average man. So women just don't have the capability to build the big muscles that men do. So really, get in there and pump the iron as hard as you can. Now I'd like to tell everybody about a special offer I'm doing right now. I'm giving away a $25 Amazon gift card in a random drawing to everybody who has left a review on iTunes for the Live Fit podcast. You have till the end of April to get your review in there. I will notify the winner of the drawing through my newsletter. So if you have not yet signed up for the newsletter, please do so. The easiest way to get the newsletter and to get to iTunes is to go to livefitlean.com/iTunes. And if you skip the iTunes, it'll take you right to the website. You'll be able to see the show notes for this and every show. You'll be able to sign up for the newsletter. And you'll also be able to read lots of cool articles and see what other podcasts are out there that I've put together. Now I'd like to move over to my interview with Erin Brown from Fit Mama Training. Today I have on the line Erin Brown of Fit Mama. She is a personal trainer, lecturer, and body image expert, would you say, Erin?
Yeah, perfect.
Well, I'd like to thank you for getting on the line with me today and sharing your personal touch, your spin on how people can improve their image, their body composition, and really their enjoyment and their pleasure in life.
Yes. I like all of those things.
I would like to start by getting a little bit of background on you, and that will lead us to where you are right now.
Well, I spent most of my life either morbidly obese or really convinced that I was. To go really far back, when I was 4 years old is the first time I recall having serious issues with my body, and I quit ballet because my body was different than the other girls in class. It wasn't as, long, and kids get really kind of stringy when they grow up faster than they grow out, and I never was like that. I always filled out proportionately. And so 4 years old is the first time I remember having disparaging feelings about my body, and that followed me through my whole life.
4 years old, really?
Yeah, and I have a 5-year-old now, which makes it even sadder to me because that's such an innocent age where you're just passionate about everything, and I was really concerned about dieting at 4. So I did a lot of what everybody says they do, tried everything. I dieted on and off. I'd go on sort of exercise binges for short amounts of time, and nothing ever worked for me. And what I ended up discovering is that the issue wasn't that there was something wrong with my body, it's that there was something wrong with the way I was thinking about it. And there had been something wrong with the way I was thinking about it for my whole life.
Well, I have to back up to where you said you first started thinking about it at 4 years old, and then what you just said is how you've been thinking about your body in the wrong way your whole life. I have to know, there must have been some sort of programming, probably unintentionally, leading up to your self displeasure.
Totally.
At 4 years old.
It wasn't until I was having my own daughter that I was able to acknowledge that. I don't think that it's that I didn't know before, but there are things about ourselves and about our lives that we can really convince ourselves aren't true if we try hard enough. So I was mad throughout my teenage years and my 20s at the media, at magazines, at weight loss commercials, and all of these things that felt like they were really telling me negative things about myself, and they were. But at 4 years old, I wasn't reading cosmopolitan magazines. I wasn't cognizant of diet commercials, and I wasn't even watching any programming where I would be aware of this. I learned that behavior from watching my mother, and I have an amazing mother. Every time I say that, it hurts a little bit because she's the best, and she had no idea she was having that impact on me. She wasn't saying anything awful about me. I watched her diet and focus on, if she brought M&Ms home, she would hide them from herself or praise herself for having a little or berate herself for having too much. She was constantly worried about what was happening at the scale. And when you're little, your mother is the most beautiful woman in the world. So I learned from watching the most beautiful woman in the world focus so much on shrinking to be good enough that I didn't think there was any other option for me.
Wow, that's amazing. I've heard similar stories before, but honestly, they haven't gone back as young as 4 years old with other people that I've talked to. I'm sure you're not completely an anomaly. But also, I've heard much more blatant stories of mothers being kind of showing self-hatred and dieting on and on and off and on and off. And it's really interesting that such a subtle nuances of behavior and some words here and there had that effect on you.
Well, there's a couple of things. I'm an empath, and so any empath will totally understand that, we just absorb what's happening around us, and I always have been. So when I was 4, picking up on that probably quicker than some other kids makes sense. But the other thing is that it's not about blaming anyone. It's something that's been passed on from generation to generation of women. My grandmother, whom I love, less close to with my mother, but, I love my grandma. She was really worried about me in college because, one, I was going to college, so if I wasn't getting an MRS degree, what was the point of that? And 2, I gained a lot of weight in college, and my acne was flaring up, and she was really concerned with both of those things that I wouldn't be able to get a husband. And even though those things were actually mean, she was displaying unkindness towards me. It wasn't about me, and it wasn't about her being unkind. She just learned from her mother that the way to be a good woman is to stay petite and attractive and land yourself a man. And she just wanted all of those things for me because she thought that's what would be best for me. So even mothers that are seemingly cruel to their children with like enforcing diets on young girls, it's not necessarily coming from a place of cruelty. They just also are conditioned to believe that a woman's worth is in her size, and they want to help their daughter be worthy, even though it's an incorrect way of thinking.
True. And I think it's probably unintentional 99% of the time. I think there are very few women who are cruel to their kids, even semi-intentionally. They usually want what's best for them. However, what I have heard of and from speaking with people before is that sometimes the mothers feel a little bit intimidated by their daughters looking better than them, and so then there's little subtle snide remarks here and there, and that's unfortunate, and that's sort of a self-esteem issue with the mother, and unfortunately it results in a poor self-value of the child as she grows up.
Well, it's all the same thing to me. There's this cultural expectation that women are most valuable when attractive, and attractive has been narrowed down to a very, very narrow ideal. And we are so wrapped up in this knowing that we aren't good enough. And that's the trick. That's the real trick that you got to figure out, is that there's no winning that. It doesn't matter what you look like. Right. It doesn't matter if you're a supermodel. There's always some flaw. There's always some way to improve. So there's no winning that. But we're so focused on trying to win at that, and so focused on that it's attached to our worth and looking at our own flaws, that all we see when we look at other women is flaws too. And we call this catty behavior between women. I kind of hate that terminology because I don't think that's something inherent to women. I think it's just that we're conditioned to pick ourselves apart so much that we try to make ourselves feel a little better by picking apart other women and realizing we're all imperfect somehow. But that's not a real security blanket. That doesn't actually make you feel better. What does is realizing that you're worthy and beautiful the way you are, and seeing worthy, beautiful people all around you. But we're doing that backwards, and it's all from the same sort of mentality. Yeah,
instead of bringing yourself up, you bring others around you down to make you appear that you're elevated. And you know what you said about picking each other apart, I've heard of that happening as young as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old with girls. And I was really flabbergasted at that because me being a boy, growing up a boy, we just didn't really have that exactly the same way. There was different types of pecking order techniques that boys would use, but I don't recall seeing that with girls either. And I was pretty shocked and sad to hear that it's going on with such young girls.
Right. Well, most girls, by the time they finish elementary school, have gone on a diet. So it's younger and younger all the time. And to speak to your not having experienced that is just a difference in how we socialize genders. You know, my history prior to being a personal trainer is social work. So this is all really fascinating to me. But yeah, I mean, it's just, we teach girls totally different than we teach boys.
Now, I'd like to ask you a question about something you mentioned a little bit ago. And when I asked you about being 4 years old and kind of picking up on these attitudes from your mother about body image, you said you're an empath.
Uh-huh.
Can you expand on that a little bit for those people that aren't familiar with that word?
It's just a person who embodies empathy. So I'm sensitive to the kind of energy other people put out. So if somebody comes into a room and they're really angry, I feel that coming.
Yeah.
Often is described as people being really sensitive, and it used to be something that I thought was a weakness, but I've come to learn that it's actually a very powerful strength. You just have to learn to be able to protect your own energy so you don't just take on everybody else's stuff all the time. But it's a person who embodies empathy.
Well, that's funny because my wife and friends know that I'm pretty sensitive, and so now I'm glad to see that it is a strength and not a weakness.
It can be hard sometimes. I control my environment. I was out with friends the other day for someone's birthday. Went to a bar and was hanging out in a place I wouldn't normally, and just all of the loud. I live in a college town, drunk conversations that some of them were nasty. It's really hard for me to be in that kind of environment with so much energy that's not good. So they were teasing me because I was doing silly things like taking my scarf and putting it over my ears and saying I was in a bubble, because it's really hard for me to be around that kind of, I don't know, funky energy. But
that's funny.
I protect myself pretty well.
Well, I have to say that it makes a lot of sense why I'm able to kind of respond to clients and know what they're feeling, and I can tell how much weight they can lift. I can tell how hard they're trying just by little nuances of their body. But I'm also kind of sensitive when, like you just said, when people walk into a room. Some people are batteries and they give you energy.
Okay.
Some people are vampires and they suck your energy out of you. And then some people, not quite sure what I would call it, but they chop up your energy and they're just discombobulate you and make you feel all scattered. And I've come across all three of those people in my life. I wouldn't say most people have one or the other. They're sort of in between, but it's very interesting, and I'm glad I can put a name on it now.
Well, there's a lot of interesting articles and books. I would just Google self-care for empaths as a starting point, about learning how to utilize that to help you navigate with people and help you help people without it being such a challenge for your life.
Let's take a quick break. If you're over 40, you know how hard it is to stay fit and healthy. Everything seems to be against you. Work, kids, time, energy. Believe me, I know. But it doesn't have to be a brain drain. If you're sick up and fed of hating the way you look and feel, if you're confused and overwhelmed about how to eat and what to do, and if you are really ready to make that change to become a fit and healthy person that your kids can look up to, then Live Fit is for you. In just 9 weeks, I can help you become the fit, healthy, and free person you deserve to be. Visit livefitonline.net. And I want to now ask you if you can just, in a quick synopsis, tell us what you do right now. What's your life, professional life like? What's your scope?
Well, I started personal training just sort of organically after I lost 100 pounds. Everybody was asking me what I was doing, and I was really passionate about exercise, and so I started doing that. But when I started taking on social media and having my website, I never used that space to advertise personal training. I was always using it to talk about self-worth, because that was always really what I was passionate about. And so while I continue to train a few clients who are just, sort of grandfathered in, old clients that I'll probably have forever, most of my day-to-day work is writing. I was actually finishing up my first book when you called.
All right.
And lecturing. I go to institutions, conferences, anyone that calls and asks what's a good fit for my story, and talk about the steps I took to go from a really negative sense of self-worth to a positive one.
Well, that's what I want to ask you now. How did you do that? Because you said that you were overweight, obese, and you lost 90 pounds. So what happened to make you go from a bad self-image and self-worth to what appears to be a quite healthy self-image and value?
Well, the huge thing that I mentioned before is I found out I was pregnant, and I immediately knew I was having a girl, and I couldn't unknow where I had learned this pattern. And I also couldn't unknow that the big problem in my life was the way that I talked about myself to myself and the way I perceived myself, and not my weight. Because I wasn't worried that I would pass on my weight to my daughter. I wasn't worried about having a fat kid. I wasn't worried about her having a fat mom. None of that mattered to me. What I was worried about is that my internal voice would become hers, and I needed to change that. So the first thing that I did is I stopped talking badly about my body. And I stopped when I was pregnant, because I knew I would need some practice. It's like if you curse like a sailor, but you want to edit in front of your grandma. That doesn't usually work very well. You need to kind of be mindful all the time. And just in thinking about not giving voice to my insecurities, I realized how often they were coming up, that I was really obsessed with bullying myself, and I had no idea, because it had just become my inner monologue. So getting dressed in the morning, I said terrible things to myself. Sitting down for a meal, I said terrible things for myself. I hid when I eat. When I would eat, I would go to multiple fast food restaurants and sit in the parking lot and eat by myself and feel awful the whole time. I was just constantly giving myself these messages of guilt and how terrible I was and what's wrong with you. Just being mindful of it was huge because it had become an automatic thing. It felt like just truth and not like something I was doing to myself. I also had to stop talking badly about other people, sort of what I was talking about before. But when people feel really good about themselves and their choices, they don't sit around being critical of others. They really just don't have the energy for that. And so in order for me to continue with working on my own self-esteem, I had to stop being overly critical of other women's bodies. Partially because that encourages the agreement that I had made with myself that bodies are objects for picking apart and they're right or wrong. I needed to just let that go and soften my gaze of other women. In doing so, I started seeing beauty in other women, and I started seeing it in myself. And then the big behavior change came after I was able to sort of soften my lens to myself and others, and I started experimenting with exercise and with healthy foods to figure out what felt best to me and let feel good be my motivation, because I wanted to teach my daughter that we don't have to be martyrs as women and we don't have to beat ourselves up all the time, but we do deserve to be on our own list of priorities. And so I started just experimenting with what would make me feel good and participating in exercise and fixing myself foods that made me feel good because I believed that I had a body that deserved to feel good. And all of that resulted in weight loss that has stayed off pretty effortlessly because it's continued to be about feeling good and not about maintaining a particular size or, you know, being concerned that I won a particular weight loss goal because having smaller pants really didn't make me happy.
My God, I love your attitude. I can't tell you how big I'm smiling right now to hear you say all this. I hear this so infrequently, and even when I do, it's just little snippets here and there. I love women. I think every woman is beautiful, or at least has beautiful parts. And I don't mean physically. I mean personality, all of it, or little bits and pieces here together. And it makes me really sad when they tear themselves down. I got into this business of helping people find good health and fitness because there's so many sick people out there that have essentially done it to themselves. I'm not saying it's their fault per se. There's things that happened our upbringing, whether it's school or parents or friends or whatever it might be. But the mental aspect of it is one that's more difficult to address because you can't really see it. It's hidden. Other people can't see it. You can leave yourself notes on the refrigerator that says, "Are you really hungry?" And that might work to keep you from eating. But if you still hate yourself, you're going to eventually eat that food. And like you said, sitting outside fast food restaurants, eating and hating yourself is a kind of an extreme example of that. But you're not alone in doing that sort of thing.
No, and I've always been the kind of person that has sort of the therapist bartender personality. I sort of know the deep, dark secrets of most people I've ever known. And so in just sort of being that kind of person, I've been having conversations with women about their bodies my whole life. And I've never met a type of woman who feels like she's perfect or a particular type of woman who has the market cornered on self-hatred. When we pick each other apart, we're missing that it's all this perception. It's all this lens we have of ourselves. So the most beautiful girl in the room may have no idea that she's it. And she may be the one that needs the most help in feeling good about herself. But we tend to believe that wherever we're at is the darkest, and it's not. On the converse side of things, the smaller group of women that I have known in my life who do have good perceptions of their body don't look a particular way either. It's a perception thing. It is not a size thing at all. I've seen women lose a lot of weight and do amazing feats of strength and do things like CrossFit or whatever and get ab muscles and all of the things you think would make them happy. But yet every time I see them, they're trying a new weight loss program. They're showing me areas of fat they're working on. They're never going to be satisfied because their mindset is, I will never be enough.
that's really unfortunate. And a lot of what you're saying is acceptance, just accepting the way you are. Your genes from your parents made your shape the way it is. And certainly we can improve upon, usually we can improve upon certain things, but only to a certain point. And we can also make that worse. And I think the real issue is acceptance. Now, the gray area that I have trouble really explaining to people is accepting your body and yourself the way you are, yet still improving upon it for better health. If, let's say, you're 50 pounds overweight, you can improve your body composition because that's better for your overall health and mobility, and especially if you're any kind of athlete at all. But where do you draw the line between acceptance and complacency?
Well, I guess I'm asking for an entire paradigm shift, which, is no small feat. But
No.
what I didn't know, and what I was actually kind of pissed about when I started eating whole foods and exercising and taking really good care of my body, what I had never been presented to me before is how good that would feel. I thought that I was just tired all the time. I thought that I just was kind of sick all the time. I thought that was just the way it is. A lot of times when I'm working with clients and they're changing their behaviors, they'll come to me and say, what is this feeling? Is this like a newbie high you get from vegetables? Like, what is this? And I'm like, no, that's like health. That's vibrance, But I think exercise and healthy eating has a serious PR problem as long as we attach it to body size and worth and attractiveness. I don't think that's the point. I think that when you let feeling good be your motivator, you're going to naturally get to a weight that really suits your body and your activity level. And I think that looks different for everyone. For my body type, for example, it would be a very disciplined regimen for me to have visible ab muscles. And at this point in my life, that's not something I'm willing to focus that energy on. I sort of have secret pipe dreams of doing that as a senior citizen. I think it'd be fun to be a senior bodybuilder. But right now,
Nice.
I have other ambitions and goals, and my exercise and my eating habits really support a health that feels good to me, and I don't have to attach it to my body size. So I think accepting your body is not the same as saying I don't deserve better health. It's not the same as saying losing some weight might make it easier for me to get upstairs. But I think when you're motivated by fixing something that is wrong with you, even if it's fixing your poor health, if you think something's wrong and you're fixing it, you're going to be coming from a negative space. And it's really hard to maintain behaviors that come out of a feeling that something is wrong with you. Whereas if you accept where you're at today, and for me in the beginning, that was just accepting this as a starting point. I was 240 pounds when I got pregnant with my daughter. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without being winded, and I was kind of sick about that. I didn't want that for myself. But I accepted my body as a starting point and then started working on my actual health, but that doesn't have to be about body size. It can be just about feeling good.
Yeah, and it really is kind of hard to convince somebody who's used to eating junk food, fast food, candy, soda, how good can feel. And in fact, I've talked to people about that, and they say, oh, I feel great after eating at McDonald's or eating the pizza or whatever it might be. And that's because they're used to that, but they're also not accepting that they feel those crashes and the lows. And once they do feel what good feels like after eating a good food for, let's say, a week and exercising on a daily basis, and I don't mean it has to be out of proportion, but then they really kind of wake up and say, wow, this is amazing.
It takes time. One of my favorite emails I got recently from a client was that I had ruined, I can't remember what it was, Denny's, some restaurant that I don't actually have here. I'd ruined some restaurant for her because she was in a hurry and she had her kids and they went to this place that they go and she just got this thing she usually gets. And it was like this one time she wasn't going to beat herself up about it, which is where I'm always coming from with people. So I was proud of that. And she didn't like the taste of it anymore. She felt gross afterwards, and not gross in a I feel so guilty, but just my body doesn't enjoy this. My taste buds don't enjoy this. I would really much rather have the whole foods that I didn't take the time to prepare for myself today. And that's beautiful to me, because rather than giving her a framework that says, egg whites and oatmeal only for breakfast, but just saying, let's try and do whole foods and let's see how that feels, allowed her to have that experience where she realized that that food wasn't serving her energy, wasn't serving her health, didn't make her feel good, and didn't even taste the way she remembered it, because we'd removed all of the guilt from it. She wasn't feeling badly that she had, upset me. She didn't let anyone down. She was just choosing a meal. And now she has an objective reason to not choose that meal again because it doesn't feel good.
That's fantastic. I've heard that similar stories myself from my clients, and every time they tell me, I just pump my fists and go, yes, victory.
Right. Yeah.
And I have a goal with myself and my Live Fit program to help 1 million people, to convert 1 million people to health and fitness. And I'm wondering, what's your goal for your career?
I would love, and this is selfish, because I have a little girl who's looking around at the women around her. I would love for her to live in a world where women don't see each other as competition, specifically as competition for men, which is different than competition for, an actual race of any kind. I would love to see her in a world where she can see women who aren't constantly apologizing for their bodies. Some of the most powerful women I know, who in every other area of their life are just like kicking butt, will sit down with me and one of the first things they say is, but I obviously need to lose 20 pounds. Or they'll say, I'm okay with my body, but I know that da-da-da-da-da. It's like we have to live in this constant state of knowing that our body is an apology and make sure everyone else knows that we're aware of it. I don't want that anymore. I want her to feel comfortable, because she's seen plenty of examples of women who are living in their personal power and living lives that suit them and feel beautiful to them, instead of with this cloud over their heads that something is terribly wrong with them and that they don't deserve to live in their body and that they aren't worthy of their voice. So I guess it's pretty big, but I'd like to see more empowered women walking around, even women I disagree with. I just want to see more power and less apology.
I love it. Like I said, when I see people do things that are detrimental to their health, I'm not even going to go into smoking and drug abuse, but just the not exercising and eating at McDonald's, it just really torques my gourd. But the same thing with that attitude that you explained, and I just love the fact that you're putting that out there for others to see, and you're teaching others. How are you helping people? You do public speaking, which is great, but that's just to kind of whet their appetite and show them what you can do. But what sort of hands-on what approach are you using to help these women really accept themselves and be happy in their skin?
Daily messages. Social media may seem like kind of a silly space to spend a lot of your energy, but I spend a lot of energy there because that's where people are. Sending them daily messages about how I deal with my own stuff, how I live in my personal power, how I care for myself, how that makes me not a martyr, and I'm teaching my daughter to be not a martyr. I think there's messages everywhere you look that tell women to be and think and speak small. And so I'm trying to combat that with daily, regular, repetitive messages to the contrary. The thing that I'm working on right now that I hope to have done by the end of the week is a workbook that's sort of about reprogramming these thoughts, reprogramming your thoughts about others, reprogramming your thoughts about yourself, reprogramming exercise and nutrition, instead of being these things that we should all over ourselves about, being things that you deserve because they're ways that you care for yourself, that you deserve to spend time and energy on. But I'm working on my workbook right now in the speaking engagements and a lot of writing. I'm hoping to have another book as soon as this one's finished coming henceforth. But I don't do as much one-on-one coaching as I used to because I'm getting a bigger audience. And I'm impacting more women working on this larger scale right now.
That's great. So most of your messages are on Facebook, or do you email? You have an email list, or how do you reach these women?
I have a monthly email. I do a lot on Facebook. I do a lot of one-on-one emailing also. And then my book will be available on my website in the next 2 weeks, I'm hoping.
Can you tell us about your book? What's it called? What's it about?
It's called As Is, a 21-day practice for making peace with your body. And there's chapters that go at length into explaining my own story and how I was hurting myself in the past, and then mindfulness practices of every day to sort of undo your own stories and the things that you're telling yourself that no longer serve you.
Wonderful. That sounds great. I'll have to pick it up. I have an idea of what you're going to answer, but I wanted to bring this out. What do you think of these tabloid magazines? You mentioned Cosmo. What about People and some of these other like celebrity-focused magazines? What do you think about them?
I feel the same way about them as I feel about most advertising directed towards women's insecurities. I could go after them with petitions and big sticks and sit-ins and whatever, but I think that those people are just about making money and selling a product, and when we stop buying it, they'll change the product. Walmart has organic produce now, and it's not because Walmart cares that we have organic produce. It's because the consumers wanted organic produce. So I think when we stop buying whose cellulite is worse magazine covers, when we stop being susceptible to advertising that says there's, happiness at the end of the weight loss rainbow, then we're going to start getting messages that actually resonate with us. But we have to take that power back and decide that we're not going to participate in that nonsense anymore.
Well, do you feel that reading those types of magazines are harmful to a woman's self-image?
Absolutely. It's just the same as sitting around with your friends and talking about someone's body. It's the same agreement that bodies are for objectifying and picking apart, and they're supposed to be a certain way. And that translates to yourself. When you sit around with a girlfriend and are like, oh my gosh, that girl and her outfit, can you believe, with her thighs, whatever. I'm not very good at it anymore, I guess. What your girlfriend is thinking is, oh my gosh, if she thinks that about her, what does she think about me? And if you are looking at women with that lens of everything that's wrong with them, then you're also giving that to yourself. So I think as a gift to yourself, don't participate in that. Don't buy those magazines. If it feels good to write a letter, but mostly don't support it, because all of those things will change as we do. And I think that we are going to have to change first, unfortunately, because they're just in the business of making money, and we have to take responsibility for our own self-respect.
And you can't really blame them for that. The fast food industry is as big as it is because people buy it. They vote with their wallet, and same with these magazines. But when I see these magazines, I have an old computer phrase that comes to mind: garbage in, garbage out. And I really feel that it is true. If you eat crappy food, you're going to have crappy health. If you read crappy stuff, you're going to kind of have that same thought process. If you're reading really negative stuff, you're going to walk around and gripe and bitch and look at all kinds of, look at the world in a negative, hostile place. Right.
Same as the people you surround yourself with.
Right. Yeah. It's the people that are around you that talk. You're kind of picking up their attitudes, their thought processes. Mm-hmm. There's people I know that are very negative, and then after I've been around them, I go one of two ways. Either I sort of model them a little bit, and I find myself sort of mimicking some of the things they would say, or if they're really extreme, I'm turned off, and I'm like, oh, yeah. But then I find myself bitching about them, and so is that really any better?
Right. Oh, well, I think that what you give energy to grows. So, rather than being upset about what you don't like, spending time praising what you do would probably suit you well, but still be able to help you move in the same direction. But yeah, the people we surround ourselves with and music we listen to, I am like the princess in the pea with my energy lately, because I have realized that I have a finite amount of energy in each day. I don't wake up with a different amount of hours, a different amount of myself to expend. I have X amount, and I just refuse to spend any moment of that dismantling somebody else, picking myself apart, listening to music that doesn't make me feel good, watching television that doesn't make me feel good, and that's tricky. I like trying to watch television and just kind of numb out for a moment, but half of the commercials are telling me about what's wrong with my cellulite and, less of you, more of life at the Weight Loss Surgical Center, and I just can't do it. So I'm very cautious of what I spend my time consuming, whether that be in my relationships or with my food or with what I'm listening to, because I only have X amount of energy and I want to spend it all really positively.
I think the problem with this garbage in is that a lot of people, I'm going to say men and women alike, they don't realize what it's doing to them. Just like eating fast food, they think that they're fine and it doesn't affect them, yet they get all these negative images, words alike, and they're not realizing that it's harmful. They're thinking they're impervious to it.
Right. Well, but they're probably not seeking you out if
True.
They don't think that there's something that could be improved upon. That said, though, and this might be a different thought for you, but I don't really personally have any problem with someone who wants to do a lot of couch sitting and Arby's eating. If that's how you want to expend your precious, beautiful life, if that makes you feel joyful and awesome, I would rather you do that than do that and feel guilty about it all the time.
Right,
I don't have any judgment about that at all. If you want to experience more vibrant health, if you want to have more energy, then there are objective steps to take in that direction. And if you prefer eating, junk and sitting on your couch, then enjoy your life and feel good about that. I just want people to feel good about their choices and not come from a place of self-despair and guilt all the time. Like, if that's what you want to do it. Don't ruin it with all your guilt. Just do it. And if you want to make different choices, do that.
I completely agree with you. I'm not a fan of guilt. I find that for the most part, it's only harmful. My only issue with people living like that is it's usually not very good for their health, and eventually they're going to start having their body not like them very much, and they're going to feel sickly and weak and have physical issues, and then their quality of life is going to go down. So that's my side of that coin. But I totally agree with you. No guilt. I would like to end this interview with some tips that people could use now without giving away the farm. Maybe there's some things that people listening to this could take to heart and perhaps evaluate their own life or make a couple of little changes. Do you have any tips or ideas?
I would say, just as a starting point, to be really mindful of how and when you are talking to yourself about yourself. I'd say now that I was obsessed with hating myself, but I had no idea I was doing that at the time. I thought that I was just having an appropriate response to being me. So just being mindful is going to be a really good step towards taking responsibility for your inner voice. You're just mindful of it. Being mindful of the way you talk about other people is a pretty good reflection of the way that you feel about yourself. And experimenting with things that might make you feel good. It's not going to look like everybody else's. It doesn't have to be the same diet plan anybody else is going to follow, but just doing what feels good to you and experimenting to figure out what that's about. Weight loss and better health does not have to be about, chasing smaller pants and ripped ab dreams. It can just be about feeling really good. And selfishly, whether you're a mother or not, I am, but little girls are watching you. So if you are talking badly about yourself, if you're talking badly about even celebrities on TV, we are furthering the agreement that we're here to be looked at and picked apart. And as a mother, I would really ask you to consider if that's doing anything positive for anyone.
So, Erin, what do you do for exercise? I know you're a personal trainer, so you are pretty knowledgeable about the body. What's your favorite way to keep fit?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that I did not begin as a personal trainer, and I didn't begin with any real educational foundation. So I started with just walks around the block, and I would go for one walk around the block with my dogs about 3 days a week, and slowly started adding hills to that. And I found a program in Prevention Magazine, actually, that's for women over 40 to turn your walk into a jog. And I was 25 and thought I should be able to turn my walk into a jog if this is for women over 40.
Right.
And so I did that program. So within the first year, it was hard for me. It took me a week to get up to jogging a minute. And within that same year, I ran my first half marathon. So it's always been about just doing one little step after another, not even trying to improve upon yesterday, but just trying to do whatever my best that day was. So now I really just exercise intuitively. I don't have a program I follow. Sometimes I do. This is not a prescription. It's just me paying attention to having a beautiful life and not just having a particular kind of body. So when I need to feel powerful, I like to do strength training. I like Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting, plyometrics, that kind of stuff in the gym. When weather permits, I really love to be in the trees. I love to be outside, and so I go hiking in the woods almost daily. I run. I do yoga, but I just really approach exercise as a spiritual practice and ask myself every day what I need, as opposed to looking in the mirror and seeing what body part needs attention.
Or following some strict routine.
Right.
We're on the same page. That's exactly how I work out, and that's also how I train for bike racing too. I just sort of, I call it my German method, willy-nilly. I work out willy-nilly, but that's essentially, it's intuitive is really what it looks at. I'd also like to know what your eating philosophy is. Do you follow any particular style?
Well, I also was really ignorant about food. So when I decided I'm going to, eat healthy, I had to do a lot of research about what that meant, because it's frustrating that you can go to the grocery store and buy hundreds of products that say healthy on them that actually aren't. Mm-hmm. So, especially if they're products. So I read a bunch of books. I read about paleo. I read about no carb. I read, the China study. I read about vegans. I read about all kinds of things just to see what really made the most sense to me. And so I don't follow any particular program. I have a hard time with people who are really dogmatic about nutrition philosophies, not because, I care about what they're putting in their bodies, but the idea that the way they eat is what's going to be best for everyone, I think is a little unfortunate. So I eat primarily whole foods. I bake from scratch. I cook from scratch. For my personal, for my body, it's best for me to avoid dairy. And I do eat dairy, but not a ton. And that's not because of weight loss or paleo or anything, but it's because it makes me gassy. And I prefer not to be gassy. I'm sure other people around me also prefer that. And I avoid eating large amounts of pastas and breads in one sitting because it makes me puffy. It makes my face puffy, actually. But those aren't things that I avoid completely. I also really like whiskey. And I know that if I drink whiskey, that I'm probably not going to feel great in the morning and probably not going to go for a run. So I sort of approach the foods that my body doesn't respond well to in the same way. If I have some of this, I'm not going to feel amazing. Is it worth it? And choose accordingly. But I do eat a plant-based diet, and I eat primarily whole foods, and I don't freak out about anything that diverges away from that.
Where can people get a hold of you?
My website is IamErinBrown.com, and I'm pretty streamlined. So IamErinBrown@gmail is my email, and I always respond to emails. I prioritize current clients, but within a couple of days, I tend to get back to people. And then on Facebook, it's facebook.com/IamErinBrown, and Twitter, which is very occasional because as you can tell, I'm not 148 characters or less type of woman, but I'm also I Am Erin Brown on there.
Erin, I truly, truly loved speaking with you. I can't wait to get this episode out there. I hope 1 million people listen to it, and I think you definitely are onto something, and I imagine you are going to change quite a few lives in your time. So the more people that hear you, the better, and it's going to take them one step closer to good health, good happiness, good wellness.
Thank you.
So thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Erin Brown. That was a wonderful interview. Let me tell you, she is a breath of fresh air. It is so refreshing to hear a woman speak like that. It's so rare. So many times people, unfortunately women mostly, are trying to change their appearance. Everything is about their appearance. And you can be beautiful without looking like a model in a magazine. And I really hate the the stigma or the attitude that you have to look a certain way in order to be beautiful, and beautiful women telling me that they want to look a different way, and it's really, it hurts my heart to hear that they're just so unhappy with themselves, especially when they're fit and healthy and beautiful as they are, that they aren't good enough and they want to change, and they think people will like them better or they'll like themselves better. So please follow Erin Brown, go to her website, go to one of her talks, whatever you can. She has a ton of really good motivating experience and insight that can help everybody, not just women, but she is focusing on women. Now, once again, I'd just like to remind you, I'm having a raffle for everybody who has left a review for this show on iTunes. If you have not yet done so, you still have time. Get it in by the end of April. On May 1st, I'm going to draw names out of a hat to win a $25 gift card from Amazon. I will notify the winner via my newsletter, so make sure you get on that. You can sign up on livefitlean.com, and you can get a direct link to iTunes with livefitlean.com/iTunes. Now I'd like to give you this week's question of the week. By doing yoga exercises, you can A, improve flexibility, balance, and posture. B, lengthen the muscles of the body. C, build bigger muscles. D, learn how to chant. I will give you the answer to this and so much more in next week's Live Fit podcast. Until then, live fit.
And thank you for listening to the Live Fit podcast.